of Spain, military industries of Spain and France. This is another example of this contradiction between something happened here. Another example between to illustrate the contradiction between Europeanization and Euro-Atlantic, because some countries believe that the USA should keep intervening in European affairs, in particular EU politics, because it is the only way to counterbalance the economic power of Germany and the political military power of France, and to leverage via the USA the power of balance, the balance of power within the EU architecture. Again, from this very angle, we can consider of enlargement and deepening. Enlargement means that we expand the reach of the European Union. The European Union gain the ability to act more globally than regionally, but at the same time appears unable or unwilling to move, to unite each authority and to give the member state to give up the core, the hardcore powers in the hands of the EU. And of course, we have integration and pluralism in the mind of many scholars, practitioners, and of course, part of the EU people. Integration means, and this unification means that we are going to construct a single European citizen without pay attention or without giving due respect for national idiosyncrasies and national particularistic. So they don't want all this. They believe that integration works against pluralism and against their effort to preserve local and national particularity. I'm sorry for that. Something happened. Okay, and that is why I explained to you before what is the case of, that is why many issues, because we are unable to deal effectively with all this contradiction, and European leaders prefer to prepare politicization, politicize all this issue to resolve them, and that is, according to my view, a great problem. And here the question is, that Europe's is made up of industrial societies. The question is how much this society are not so much modern. We are moving to a new era of postmodernity, perhaps, according to many scholars, to post-industrial society. That means that all this society are becoming more complex, and a standard of living have risen fastly so far, but now this the rate of growth and development is not so high, and this may yield a number of problems, because it widens the gap between affluent and non-affluent society, between rich and poor. And these gaps may be widened by factors as economic recession. And in the last decades, the European Union experiences three major crises, not only the global economic crisis, but the crisis of refugees and the migration and refugees crisis, and the COVID and coronavirus crisis. And this problem, this crisis, are aggravated by long-lasting factors such as industrial relocation, the aging of the population, and problems with public finances. Don't forget that European integration aim to transfer public funds from the less developed, from more developed to less developed regions and countries. And of course, all this working together, it's not an easy venture, but at the same time, all people and all leaders in the EU strongly believe that working together does not mean erasing the distinct cultural and linguistic identity of individual countries, but this distinct cultural and linguistic identity, along with material condition, does not allow the European Union move forward more rapidly and deepen the process of integration. And the problem here that we are experiencing now is that the EU activities which are supposed to promote and deepen integration produce the other produce the opposite result, that promote regional specialities, regional local particularity, and the diversity of Europe tradition and culture. But at the same time, the challenge for all of us is that this Europe-wide trade competition must be counterbalanced by Europe-wide solidarity. But so far, we haven't find ways how to establish this solidarity. And one problem for that is that how we, this is the first problem, is politicization, is the way found out by the member state to substitute for a solution. And the other is that the member state haven't so far found out how to enhance and promote the so-called EU actors. And here, this issue brings us to the next, to our next slide. We have to realize the particulars of the decision-making and taking process. And here, the problem is that, first of all, public policy, what are the fundamentals? When we want to set up, to design and devise a public policy, we have to have very clear in our mind the difference between policy and strategy. In fact, strategy is the engine of policy. Unless a policy is established, it is impossible to put forward strategy. That means is meant to imply that first we establish policy, and policy has to do not only with the process of decision making, but fundamentally and above all, the first and foremost aim or mission of policy, and that is the mission rest with politician or with leadership, is to establish the goals. And of course, that is the end. And of course, then they should discuss the end and who are the engines of this policy. That means the makers, the takers, the communicator, the implementer, the analyst. For instance, we all here in the summer school, no matter what is our educational professional background, we are in fact analysts. We are trying to understand how, for instance, within the context of this EU summer school, to understand how the EU functions. But at the same time, when we move out and we go to back to our work place, or when we, as for instance, in my case, as I'm concerned, I'm writing a paper or I intervene in public discussion by a piece, a short piece, a short brief, or some commentary. I am a communicator or a maker, because I'm trying to influence how policy should look like. And some others, for instance, state executives, are at the same time makers and above all, depending on their position, the takers. That has to do with engine, but sometimes we focus on this detail, forgetting that the first and foremost element of policy is what is its end. Why we want to establish this policy? What is our destination? In other terms, a policy set out where are we want or we decide to go, and strategy sets out how we go to the destination we have decided to go. And this problem is complicated or aggravated by the fact that a policy is not a matter of a single individual. We are talking about public policy, and here we have to keep in mind that we have so far established some basic or some fundamentals in terms of norms, that sometimes we are unable to devise a policy because the end we want to implement or to achieve comes in conflict with long-lasting norm. And the question here is, what are we going to do? We favor the new and at the expense of the norms, the old question of progress against tradition, but it's not simply theoretical. It is not an academic problem. It is a very, very, very practical problem. Let's take, I give you a very illustrative example, is that today some member states in the EU argue in favor of giving up one country, one vote, of giving up the unanimity vote, and to expand the scope of qualifying majority vote. The quarrel here, the context here is that a very this would improve our way to make a more efficient decision, but at the same time, this would give fewer opportunities to smaller or weaker country state to voice their view within EU institution. And the fear here is that stronger and more powerful EU members who perhaps have more resources, material and human, to cooperate or to devote to cooperation, could establish via this qualifying majority vote their own view of how or perception of how the EU should function from now on. Here, this is something that we overlook sometime in the European Union. So here you see the cycle of the policy making. First of all, we should identify the problem. A good deal or a great deal of quarrels or discussion in the EU concern how to undefine the identification of problems. Will not all member states agree on the aspect of the problem we are dealing with, and that is a great problem. And then if we can reach a compromise regarding the problem identification, then we have to formulate policy. We have to agree on the end of this policy, where are we want to go. And then, of course, we have a policy adoption. That means because we are not, it is one thing to take the decision within EU bodies, and it's another thing to adopt and implement this EU decision through in a national context, because sometimes all this EU legislation go through national legislation. And of course, then we have another question: how we evaluate this policy? What are the standards, the criteria, and the standard we set in order to evaluate this policy? So, very quickly, international actors, and here I devote 10 minutes before I complete this presentation to common foreign and security policy. The big challenge of European countries in the years ahead will be to stand together in the face of global crisis and to find together a way out of recession and into sustainable growth. The European Union has more influence on the world stage when it speaks with a single voice in international affairs such as trade negotiation. And to that end, as mentioned before, the European Union, by way of the Lisbon Treaty, acquire a permanent residence, and the first high representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy was appointed, and this is a vice president of the European Commission as well. So far, historical record illustrate that all EU countries more or less have been beneficiaries of European integration. And 60 years of European integration has shown that the EU as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It has much more economic, social, technological, commercial, and political clout that if each member state had to act individually. There is an added value in acting together and speaking with a single voice. But how the EU exercise this influence and materialize its act on Earth? First of all, and with the crux of European global influence and reach stand in the fact that the European Union is the world leading trading power, and therefore plays a decisive role in the international negotiation, such as those taking place within the World Trade Organization or the United Nations Conference or climate change or G20. The EU, in addition, the EU takes a clear position on sensitive issues affecting ordinary people, such as environmental protection, renewable energy resources, food safety, the ethical aspect of biotechnology, the need to protect endangered species. In addition, the EU remains at the forefront of global effort to tackle global warming, and has made a decision to achieve very specific target in terms of environmental protection. I could say that the old saying unity is threat is thus as relevant as ever to today European, despite contradiction. However, in the area of defense and security policy, each country remains sovereign, and in this area, the decision continue to be taken unanimously. Not by major qualified majority vote. From this point of view, it is sometimes said that the EU has become an economic giant, but remain in political dwarf. And remain a political dwarf. And the question is why? Some scholars argue, and this is my take in part, this is an exaggeration. The European Union has considerable influence within a great number and very influential international organization, and specialized and at World Summit on a wide range of issues. Nevertheless, it is true that the EU and each member have a long way to go in diplomatic and political terms before they can speak with one voice on major world issues. What is more, military defense, yes, indeed, remains in the hands of national governments, whose ties are those formed within alliances such as NATO. And on the other hand, we should not forget that the European Union has established a common foreign and security policy, and along with a European security and defense policy. And the aim here is to force European member states start speaking out with a single voice. However, the problem apparently is that decisions are taken by consensus, although individual states can abstain. Although the Treaty of Lisbon did away with pillar in the EU structures, it did not change the way in which security and defense matters are decided. However, it changed the policy's name from European security and defense policy to common security and defense policy. And also it raised the profile of the European foreign security policy by creating the post of High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. And of course, the aim of EU foreign policy is essentially to ensure security, stability, democracy, respect for human rights, not only in its immediate neighborhood, but also in other hotspots around the world, including Africa and the Middle East. The heart of the matter is that the main tool of this common security and foreign policy is soft power, which cover linkages, network, include subjects like election observation missions, humanitarian aid, development assistance. Don't forget that EU donate humanitarian aid more than 1.5 billion, provides 60%, the EU provides 60% of the world development assistance and helps many countries, not only in its immediate neighborhood, to fight poverty, feed their people, avoid natural disaster, access drinking water, and fight disease. At the same time, the EU encourages this country to respect the rule of law and to open their market to international trade. Bear in mind that these two aims are condition for the new candidate countries who want to join the EU. And the question here, and as I explained before I set out the question, is whether the European Union has the human and the material resources to assure to ensure its common security and foreign policy objective, or to achieve this objective. As I explained before, the Lisbon Treaty has set out or laid the ground to set up a very well-organized institutional mechanism in order to achieve this objective. Today, in the EU, we have, for instance, even an European Intelligence Agency. We have a European Satellite Center. We have mechanisms that are authorized to coordinate military staffs to establish rules of engagement in a great number of conflicts. So the question And in addition, here again, has so far organized many missions, civilian and both civilians and military, all over the world, including Latin America, and of course the American continent. But a very great number of missions have been operating or have been or are being operating here in Africa or in Asia. And in addition, we have elaborated and set forth strategic concept like the EU global strategy, giving priority to the security of the EU from external threat, but here the threat are not so much military per se, but non-military. And we try to establish mechanism in order to make our service, I mean, all of us, the EU members, to make us more resilient after we are facing crisis, societal crisis or national disaster. We can establish an integrating approach to conflict and crisis, and to establish some norms and practices of global governments, the fundamental of which is cooperation. This is the global strategy, and of course I would like to add two more things. 2 years ago, European Council decided to intensify its effort in order for the EU to become more autonomous, of course, in practice from NATO, from autonomous in pursuing foreign and security policy objectives, and in addition, they establish a common defense fund. Adopting a neo-factionalist logic, starting from law politics of defense of the defense sector, law politics inverted comma, because don't forget that defense is part of the core of national sovereignty. And in addition, here we see that we have established a common defense fund to set forth defense cooperation in a neo-factional logic. Here, and I'm coming to my I would like to come full cycle by setting out the question: is the EU able and willing to go further than the soft powers diplomacy? I give you the examples of the Common Defense Fund or the global strategy. I would say that that is the main challenge for the year ahead. All too often, the European Council joint statement and common position on major international issues express nothing but the lowest common denominator, Meanwhile, the large member states continue to play their own individual diplomatic roles. Yet, it is when the European Union speaks with one voice that it is seen as a global player. If its credibility and influence are to grow, the EU must combine its economic might and trading power with the stand implementation of its common foreign, of its common security and defense policy. And here, the real question is, are they able to do that? In my view, and I will stop at this point because this is a question, but which gives the opportunity for a discussion and the exchange of view, is that the problem and why the EU is unprepared or reluctant to move on from soft power diplomacy to hard power diplomacy, and this is very well demonstrated by the way the European Union has so far reacting to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Even though some might argue that the sanction is in part an illustrative example of a hard power exercise. The problem is that the nation state or the EU member state continue to wield the military means of violence. The monopoly, the legitimate monopoly of violence, still rests with national state, with EU member state, and none in the EU seeks to cede or to hand this legitimate monopoly of violence over to Brussels. Of course, this is a never-ending thesis. It's open up the discussion. It's a never-ending question, and I will close my presentation with this thought for fun. Thank you very much.